Bitcoin for corporations, we've seen a real movement for every company to be a treasury company. There's been a high velocity of capital coming in. Are they doing everything they can to increase share price and increase Bitcoin per share? I also think there's a lot of opportunity for the sovereign wealth funds to play a big role in the GCC for treasury companies. You want to have healthy long-term Bitcoin thinking, but you don't want to have greed. So
From the desk of Kingsley Advani.
Hey guys, I'm Kingsley Advani, founder and CEO of Allocations. We oversee over $2 billion in assets, and we've structured about $50 million of investment into about 10 DATs, and some of which include Nakamoto, Satsuma. We've done Sol, a bunch of other Bitcoin and other DATCos. I personally invested in over 200 companies, and a bunch of them were DATs. Yeah, so MST, I think during COVID, they were sitting on a lot of cash, and they didn't have many places to put it. And, with very low interest rates and high inflation, the dollar has been depreciating in value every year. So they wanted a long-term store of value. And so Michael Saylor figured out, let's put it into Bitcoin, right? And over time, they've built up their Bitcoin reserve. They own about 3% of all the total Bitcoin supply currently. And I think about 70 to 80% of their assets are digital assets. And they're generating about 500 million a year in revenue. So they were really first mover in this space and saw this opportunity for Bitcoin-powered corporations. And since then, we've seen the next wave of that companies. And I think, especially with Bitcoin for corporations, we've seen a real movement for every company to be a treasury company. And every company has the ability to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So I think we're still early. MicroStrategy was the first mover. And I think, we have a long way to go. But we've had about $20 to $30 billion of DAT fundraising this year. So there's been a high velocity of capital coming in. July had the highest. We had about $10 billion of fundraisers into DATs. But as Christian mentioned, the liquidity pool has been drying up a little bit. We've hit a short-term bearish market. Bitcoin is down about 30% from all-time highs of 126K in October. And we've had some macro sell-offs as well. We've had, tariffs. We've had the government shutdown. We've had some bearishness with the Japan increasing interest rates and the carry trade risk. So there has been some macro bearishness this year, but I think DATs are a long-term play. And I think it's important when structuring a DATCo, you need to be efficient, keep expenses down, not too much debt, and be able to weather out a long bear market. I think a bit of both, but I think it's healthy that there's more DATCos, that, organizations like Bitcoin for Corporations was set up to help every company hold Bitcoin. So I think there's some bullishness for this, but also, as you mentioned, you don't want to have greed either. You want to have healthy long-term Bitcoin thinking, but you don't want to have greed. So I think we saw a little bit of both. I think we'll see more M&A and activism. We saw Semler Scientific acquired, and it was trading at a discount to MNAV. So I think we'll see some acquisitions of public companies trading at a discount to MNAV, and also activism for different DATs. If they're underperforming, shareholders will want to challenge that. And, are they doing everything they can to increase share price and increase Bitcoin per share? Or is there a need for new management? I'd say you have to have both. You have to understand Bitcoin and capital markets. And ultimately, you want to be out there on TV, talking about your stock and driving more interest. So you need to understand Bitcoin and capital markets in general. I think there's a massive opportunity in GCC for Bitcoin treasury companies. And if you look at the stock market caps, you have about $4.2 trillion of total stock market cap in the GCC. Saudi accounts for about 2/3 of that. You have about $2.7 trillion of market cap. Then you have the UAE, you have the Dubai financial market, and you have Abu Dhabi Stock Exchange, which is about a quarter of the total GCC. And then you have Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar. So I think we're already seeing one of the companies, Braj Group, has been an early mover in this space. They've started accumulating Bitcoin, and I think companies that dual list, not just on one exchange but on multiple, I think have a great chance of succeeding. And I do think the favorable tax regime in the GCC is attractive to investors. So I think there's a large opportunity in the GCC. I also think there's a lot of opportunity for the sovereign wealth funds to play a big role in the GCC for treasury companies. GCC has about a third of the AUM of all global global sovereign wealth funds. So I think there's a huge opportunity for long-term investing, and I think the sovereign wealth funds in GCC can play a major role. I think the MSCI indices, their proposed rule on DATCOs exceeding 50% of the total assets and digital assets from being excluded is pretty crazy. It would be pretty bad if that was affected in January. I think there's a chance either way. If it does go through, then there may be major liquidations of some of the larger DATs because they'd be delisted from those indices, and some of the larger pension funds and institutions may be forced to liquidate some of their positions. So I think it would be bad for the industry. Let's see if it goes through. I don't want it to go through, obviously. And I also agree with Christian that JP Morgan, some of the other institutions have been playing both sides, that on one hand they're supporting Bitcoin and the other they're not. And I think the whole debanking thing is pretty crazy, but it strengthens the case for Bitcoin. I'd say they become more efficient, so they use less resources to do more, and they have clearly defined moats, whether it's jurisdictional, whether it's where they're based, whether they have an operating business that generates a lot of cash flow. So I think generally DATCOs will have to become more efficient.